Hi North Star, my name is Lori Miller, and this is my story. First, I have a confession to make. My horse is the one who bucked Cody off a few years ago in the video for the Volunteer Appreciation Banquet. The video that they, meaning Jeff, kept playing over and over and over. Yeah, so I guess I should also tell you that I'm a horse trainer. The Lord has a great sense of humor, and He always finds a way to keep me humble. So let me tell you how it all began. As far back as I can remember, I've dreamed of working full-time with horses, but my life originally took a very different path. I grew up going to church with my family, but we went more out of an obligation to my relatives than out of a desire to know Jesus. And when I graduated high school, my family stopped going to church, my parents divorced, and my mother, who was the governing force in our family, moved away. So I went off to college without a guidance system and with a giant void to fill. And I spent the next 10 years trying to fill that emptiness with parties and alcohol and one broken relationship after another. Now, it's important to note that during that time, I had a friend who would look me up every 2 to 3 years. We'd meet for coffee, and he would encourage me to go back to church. And I listened to what he had to say, and then we'd go our separate ways until a few more years would pass. So I just want to encourage those of you who are praying for a loved one's salvation to never give up. Keep storming the gates of heaven, keep praying, and don't give up, because it was on the same weekend 10 years later that on Friday I met the man I would later marry. On Saturday I met my friend for coffee, and on Sunday I went back to church. Now, I had a lot to learn, and the first major lesson I learned was what it meant to follow Jesus. Because I already had a plan for my life, and it seemed good enough to me, to marry, have a new house, new cars, a lucrative career. I didn't see any problem with that. But looking back on it now, it was an awful plan. First, I married a man who didn't love the Lord, and that brought instant turmoil to our relationship. And second, my plans to include horses in my life were so small, and they nearly got buried under debt and the struggles of life. So the 2.5 years of our marriage were extremely painful for my husband and I. There was this great chasm between us that on our own, neither one of us could bridge. I am normally an eternal optimist. I love to smile, but during that time, I could barely breathe. I physically felt like I was suffocating, and I remember many times just thanking the Lord for each breath. So eventually, we decided to end the marriage, and in God's great mercy, we parted on friendly terms, but not without scars. And on that day, when my husband left for the last time, the first person I ran to was Jesus Christ. And I surrendered everything. I gave Him my plans, my dreams, and my life. On August 15th, 2001, I got my smile back, and I've been on one grand adventure ever since. It hasn't all been mountaintop experiences, and I'm still a work in progress. But I've learned that the Lord's timing is perfect, and it's worth waiting for, and that His plans will always be better than mine. And so now I just enjoy the journey. Over the past 15 years, I followed Jesus into some incredible places and had some amazing experiences. And I realized that God put the love of horses in my heart, not just to bless me, but for His glory. I have skied behind a horse in shows and dinner theaters across the U.S., in Las Vegas and LA. I've had dinner with William Shatner, and I was even a stunt woman in a movie, getting to climb onto a moving train while riding a horse bareback. Those are some really crazy stories, but my favorite ones are about the people. Because early on, when I started training horses, God showed me that He would use the horses as an open door for me to build relationships, earn trust, and share Jesus with my clients. And so before I go, I like to leave you with my favorite story about one of my very first clients, Joanne. Joanne was a woman who lived in West Virginia. She lived a hard life. She was married 7 times and endured her share of heartache and abuse and infidelity until she was eventually left empty and alone by choice. But her one dream was to own a horse. At the age of 72, she bought a 6-month-old filly, put a halter on her, and turned her out in the 5-acre field next to her house. Now, Joanne wasn't healthy enough to handle the horse, but she did make sure there was shelter, food, and water every day. So 2 years passed, and a veterinarian was driving by her property and saw the horse and noticed that the halter had become embedded in the skin above her head because the halter was still fitted for a 6-month-old. So the vet arranged for the halter to be surgically removed in the field, and she gave Joanne an ultimatum. She could either allow someone to come in and teach the horse to be caught and handled so that she could receive regular health care, have her feet trimmed, and have her new head wound treated against infection, or she could forfeit her horse to someone else who could care for her better. So then the vet called me and asked me if I would be willing to help. And she warned me that Joanne did not want me there, and there wasn't a kind bone in her body. She just wanted me to be prepared. But God had a plan. And from that very first lesson, when Joanne saw me loving her and her horse, all her barriers came down. And for the next 2 years, I would visit every week, and Joanne would sit in the lawn and we'd talk while I worked with her horse. I eventually started the horse under saddle, and at the age of 76, Joanne was able to ride her own horse a few times before she became too ill and was diagnosed with stomach cancer. Now, I have to be honest, I didn't think I was making any headway sharing Jesus with her. But it was just a few weeks after her diagnosis that I was privileged to be at her hospital bedside, to hear her confession of sin and her profession of Christ. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And the following week after she passed, I was there with her horse when she met her new loving owner. And her new owner just recently found me on Facebook to let me know that they have been having a fabulous life together. So it is incredibly humbling to me that the Lord of the universe wants me to be part of His plan. And I'm so thankful for all of you, my North Star family, and for Grisso's small group, the best small group at North Star. This is my story, and this is his story.